The first time one of his men put his hands on me, another one of his men nearly broke his arm for it. It was a Tuesday in October. I was setting up my cart on the corner of Mercer and Bell, same as I had every morning for 9 years. The buckets out, the zinc pails filled, the cheap bright dahlias that office people buy when they've done something they need to apologize for. A young man I had never seen before, new suit, new shoes, the specific walk of someone who has just been given a little bit of power and hasn't learned what it is for. Stopped at my cart. He looked at me the way I have been looked at my whole life. The up and down. The small, cruel arithmetic that ends in a number, and the number is less. He told me to move the cart. I told him I had a permit and I had stood on this corner for 9 years. He shoved the top row of pails over, water and marigolds across the sidewalk, stems snapping, the bright orange heads hitting the wet pavement like small, bright casualties, and he called me a name. The name does not matter, it is always about the size of me. The words change, the arithmetic doesn't, and then a door opened. The restaurant on the corner, Ferraro's, the old one, with the green awning and the windows you cannot see into, its side door opened, and an older man came out fast. 60-something, silver hair, the kind of heavy coat that costs more than my cart and everything on it. He crossed the sidewalk in 4 steps, took the young man by the back of the neck, not gently, not with the care of a man who is teaching, but with the grip of a man who is correcting, put his mouth next to his ear, and said something I could not hear. The young man went white. Not embarrassed white, terrified white. The white of a man who has just learned that the thing he touched belonged to someone whose displeasure is not theoretical. The older man let him go. Then he bent down, this man in his beautiful coat, on the wet sidewalk in the cold, and he began picking up my marigolds. He set the pails upright. He gathered the broken stems and laid them on the cart gently, the way you would lay down something that was still alive, something that had been hurt and deserved careful handling. And he said loud enough for me to hear, loud enough for the young man to hear, loud enough for the block, "You do not touch her, you do not speak to her. You do not let your shadow fall on her cart." "Do you understand whose order that is?" The young man said a name. I felt it more than heard it, the way the whole block seemed to lower its voice around it, the way the air changed weight, and then they were gone, both of them, back through the side door, and I was standing on the corner of Mercer and Bell with cold water in my shoes and broken marigolds in my hands, and the most dangerous men in the city, apparently arranged around the protection of me, a fat flower seller on a nothing corner, and I had absolutely no idea why. My name is Winnie Marsh. I am 37 years old. I am plus size. I sell flowers from a cart, and I have done it long enough that the doormen know my name, and the coffee place gives me the first cup free because I am there before they have customers, and because loneliness recognizes loneliness, even through a service window. I want to be honest about the smallness of my life because the smallness matters. I live in one room above a laundromat. I keep my flowers in the bathtub overnight because the cold water keeps them fresh, and because my flat has no cold storage and no room for a refrigerator that isn't the one I keep my food in. I buy my stock at 4 in the morning from the wholesale market. The seconds and the day-olds. The bunches with one bad bloom the wholesaler will let go cheap. I'm good at hiding the one bad bloom. I'm good at making a cheap bunch look like more than it cost. That is the whole skill of what I do, making something modest look like it was chosen with love, because the person buying it needs to believe it was, even if the person selling it knows the trick. 9 years on a corner teaches you things about people. They are lonely in ways they will tell a flower seller and no one else, because a flower seller is just visible enough to be human and just invisible enough to be safe. The man who buys white lilies every Thursday and never says who they are for, I know they are for a grave, because nobody buys white lilies every Thursday for a living person. The young woman who buys herself a single ranunculus every Friday because no one else will, she always smells it before she walks away, and the smelling is the whole transaction. The office worker who comes out at lunch just to stand near the buckets and breathe. He told me once it was the only green thing on his whole commute. I told him the Gerbera daisies were on sale. He said he didn't want to buy them, he just wanted to stand near them. A flower cart is not really a flower business, it is a place where the city comes to feel something for 90 seconds before it goes back inside. I had made my peace with what my life was going to be. A heavy woman, alone on a corner, with cold hands and a city that walked around her like she was a fire hydrant. I had stopped expecting anything else. My ex-husband, Paul, had wanted children and a house and a woman who fit the picture he'd been carrying in his head since he was 20. And when the woman he married, me, turned out to be a different shape than the picture. The picture won. It usually does. I was not unhappy. I want to be clear about that, because the version of the story where the flower seller is tragic before the powerful man saves her is the easy version, and I have never been the easy version. I was small and I was alone and I was enough for myself. The flowers were enough. The corner was enough. The bathtub at night, the market at 4, the doorman who knew my name, enough. And then the protection started, and enough stopped being enough. Because when powerful men rearrange a city block around you, the smallness of your life becomes a question instead of an answer. It got stranger. The courtesies accumulated like evidence of a crime I hadn't committed. A week after the Tuesday, I came to my corner, and there was a new awning over my cart. Green canvas, the same green as the restaurants bolted to the building so the rain wouldn't get into my pails. Professional installation. Someone had come in the night with tools and brackets and the specific intention of keeping my flowers dry. No note, no one to thank. The doorman said he hadn't seen anything. In the specific way a man says he hasn't seen something when he's been told not to see it. The coffee place stopped letting me pay. Not for anything. I'd hold out money, and the barista would wave it away with the forced casualness of a person following instructions. The man who collected from every cart on the block. A weekly tax. The cost of standing on a corner in a city where certain corners belong to certain people. He came down the row one Friday, and he took from the newsstand and the fruit man and the hot dog cart, and he got to me and just touched the brim of his hat and kept walking. Like I was a church, like my cart existed inside a circle he was not authorized to enter. I'm going to tell you the truth about how that felt, because the truth is not what you'd expect. It frightened me. When you are a woman, the world has decided is beneath its notice, too big, too poor, too plain. Being suddenly noticed is not a gift. It is a danger. Protection from men like this is never free. I lay awake at night and I ran through every reason a powerful and dangerous man might wrap his protection around a poor fat flower seller, and every reason I could think of was bad. I thought, they want to use my cart for something. A drop point, a signal. I thought, a debt is being built that I will not be able to pay. I thought, someone wants something from me that I haven't figured out yet, and the not knowing is the cruelest part, because the not knowing means I can't prepare. I almost left. I almost packed the tub and the cart and my one good coat and went to another city and started over as no one, because being no one had kept me alive for 37 years, and being someone, being the woman nobody touches, was a status I had not earned and could not afford. The older man, Enzo, who had picked up my marigolds, who had knelt on a wet sidewalk to gather broken stems, came by the cart sometimes. He bought a small bunch of whatever was freshest. He always paid too much and never let me give him change. And there was a formality to the transaction that was different from how other men bought flowers. He handled them carefully, the way you'd handle something that had feelings. One cold morning, 3 weeks into the impossible courtesies, 3 weeks without proper sleep, I could not stand it anymore. I said, Enzo, please. I am not a brave woman and I have not slept in 3 weeks. Please tell me what they want from me. Whatever it is, whatever the cost, just tell me, so I can stop being afraid of it. And Enzo, this hard old man who had spent 40 years doing things I do not want to imagine, whose hands had done things that hands shouldn't do, looked at me, and his face did something I had never seen on a face like his. It crumbled. Not collapsed. Crumbled. The way a wall crumbles when the thing holding it up is removed, and the thing holding it up was the secret, and the secret was too much for his face. His eyes went bright. Not angry bright. The other kind. Signora, he said, they do not want anything from you.
Then why? Because of what you already gave, he said. You just don't know you gave it. And he would not say another word. He touched his hat and walked back to the restaurant, and I stood there with my cold hands and my cheap flowers, and no more understanding than before, only now there was a different feeling underneath the fear. A feeling I did not have a name for yet, a warm thing where the cold thing had been, and the warm thing was almost worse because it felt like hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing a woman like me can carry. This is the twist.
What I had already given was something I didn't even know was being watched. Something I had done in complete invisibility for 2 years, asking nothing, telling no one, expecting nothing in return. And when they finally found out what it was, every dangerous man on that block went silent because there was nothing to say. The kindness was too pure for their arithmetic. It broke their maths. Let me take you back 2 years to a woman I knew as Agnes. She came to my cart for the first time on a Friday in spring, 2 years before the Tuesday. Small, very upright, beautifully dressed in the way old women of a certain generation are. The good coat kept 30 years, the brooch pinned every morning with hands that trembled but still knew where the clasp went. The gloves. She stood at my buckets for a long time, touching petals the way you'd touch a face, and she said mostly to herself, "My husband loved ranunculus. Nobody sells ranunculus anymore." I told her I could get ranunculus for Friday if she wanted it. She looked at me like I had said something astonishing. Like the idea that a person would go out of their way for her, would adjust their stock, change their order, carry extra weight at the wholesale market at 4 in the morning, was a thing that had not happened to her in a very long time. She came back that Friday. I had the coral ones, the prettiest, and the hardest to get, the ones the wholesaler hides in the back because restaurant buyers pay 3 times what I can. I had argued with him for 20 minutes and paid more than I should have. She held them and did not speak for a moment, and the not speaking was the loudest thank you I'd ever received. She came back the next Friday. And the Friday after that, and every Friday for a year, she was lonely. I knew it the way I know all the lonely ones, the way they linger at the cart, the way they tell me things they haven't told anyone, the way a 90-second flower purchase stretches to 10 minutes because the 10 minutes are the only conversation they'll have that day. Agnes was lonely in the specific way of an old woman whose whole world has become careful around her. She had one son. The son was, she always chose the word carefully, with the precision of a woman selecting a flower, important. Important men are busy, and the people around important men treat their mothers like porcelain on a shelf. They have made me into a photograph, she said once. Everyone is very gentle with the photograph. Nobody talks to it. Nobody argues with it. Nobody tells the photograph it is wrong about the ranunculus. So I talked to her. I teased her about the brooch. It was a bird, gold, and I told her it looked surprised. She told me I was impertinent. I told her the word was honest. We had that exchange 40 times and it never got old. I argued with her about the coral ranunculus versus the white. She insisted white was better. Elegant, classic, what Pietro always preferred. I told her the coral was warmer, richer, more alive. She said I was sentimental. I said she was stubborn. We had that argument 40 times too, and it became the architecture of our friendship, a recurring disagreement that neither of us wanted to win because winning would end it. On slow afternoons, she sat on the bench near my corner, and we talked about nothing. Her husband, Pietro, who had been dead for 11 years and was still the main character of her life. My ex-husband, Paul, who had wanted a picture and got a person, a movie she'd seen in 1962, she described the whole plot incorrectly, and I didn't correct her because the incorrectness was the charm. The way the city used to smell, the way bread used to taste, the way men used to hold doors. We talked about nothing for about a year every Friday, and it was the best friendship I had. She was the only person in my life who came to see me. Not the flowers, me. She sat on the bench because I was on the corner, and the corner was better because I was on it, and I had not been the reason a place was better since Paul left. I did not know who her son was. She never said a name. She called him my boy, the way Italian mothers do regardless of their son's age or the number of people who are afraid of him. I assumed he was a businessman, a lawyer perhaps. Why would I connect the careful old woman on the bench to the green awning down the block? The most invisible woman in the city does not assume she is sitting next to the mother of its most dangerous man. In the autumn of the second year, she stopped coming on Fridays. 2 weeks. 3. On the 4th Friday, a long, dark car came to my corner. A man I'd never seen, serious, quiet, the careful energy of someone who has been sent on a task that matters, said, "Are you the flower woman, the one she talks about?" I said, "Yes." He said, "She is asking for you." They took me to a house I won't describe, through a door I shouldn't have been able to walk through, up a staircase where men stood very still against the walls, down a hall where the silence was the specific silence of a building that has been arranged around a dying woman, and into a room with a single lamp. Agnes was in the bed, so much smaller than she had been. The brooch was on the nightstand, the surprised bird, gold positioned so she could see it. Her hands on the blanket looked like paper folded over bird bones. But her eyes were the same, sharp, warm, the eyes that had looked at coral ranunculus like it was a miracle, and when she saw me, her face did the astonished thing. The same thing it had done the very first time I told her I could get ranunculus for Friday. "You came," she said. "You asked," I said. "Of course I came." She laughed, a thin version, a shadow of the laugh I knew, and said, "Everyone here is so gentle with me. I wanted someone who would argue. So I argued with her. I told her the coral ranunculus was better than the white." She said white, in a voice that was barely there. And I said coral. And we did it one more time. The last time. The 40th time. The argument that was the whole friendship. And it was the last real conversation either of us would have, and we both knew it, and neither of us said so. Because saying so would have ended the argument, and the argument was the thing we were protecting. Before I left, she held my hand. Paper and bird bones, but insistent. "My Pietro is at Resurrection Cemetery, under the linden tree. For 11 years I have brought him ranunculus on Fridays. Coral, you were right, it was always coral." I only said white to keep the argument going. She smiled, and the smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen on a dying woman's face. "When I am gone, my son will send a service. Men who never knew us, leaving expensive flowers and leaving fast. Pietro would hate it. I do not want a service. I want a person. Someone who knew me, putting coral ranunculus under the linden tree because she wants to, not because she was paid. And when it is my turn, the same. My stone next to his, only if you're willing." I said yes, I did not think about it. I did not calculate the cost, the extra ranunculus every week. The bus fare to the cemetery, the hour of Friday mornings I would spend kneeling in dirt talking to two people who couldn't answer. A woman I loved asked me to bring flowers to the people she loved, and I said yes, the way you say yes to a thing that isn't a question but a trust. She died 11 days later. The following Friday, I went to Resurrection, found the linden tree, found Pietro, and beside him a new stone, Agnes, and I put coral ranunculus on both of them, and I knelt in the dirt and told them they were both wrong about the white, and I did that every Friday for 2 years. Every Friday, in the rain, in the cold, in the heat, with ranunculus I paid for from my nothing budget, hand-tied the way I would tie them for the cart, making something modest look like it was chosen with love, because it was. I never told a soul. I never knew that anyone saw. Here's the part I had to be told, because I could not have known it. I was invisible. Invisible people do not know they are being watched, because the whole point of being invisible is that nobody watches. Don Cosimo Ferraro buried his mother and did what men like him do with grief. He put it away and went back to being the thing the city needed him to be. He sent a professional service to the cemetery, expensive flowers weekly, the kind of arrangements that cost what my cart makes in a month, the kind of flowers a powerful man sends when he cannot send himself, because sending himself would require sitting in the dirt and talking to his mother's grave, and men like him do not sit in dirt. And every week, the service reported the same strange thing. Their expensive arrangements were being moved aside carefully, never damaged, always repositioned with respect, and in their place every Friday someone was leaving cheap, hand-tied coral ranunculus on both graves, not just Agnes's, Pietro's too, and then the someone was gone. He thought it was a message. This is the twist within the twist, the thing I didn't know until Enzo told me. The Don's first assumption was not kindness. His first assumption was threat. A man who has spent his life reading the world for danger saw anonymous flowers on his mother's grave and read them as a message from an enemy, a signal, a provocation, a reminder that they could reach his family even in death. He had it watched. He sent men to the cemetery to surveil the graves, and what they reported was a heavy woman in a cheap coat, arriving every Friday morning by bus, kneeling under the linden tree, laying coral ranunculus on 2 graves and talking to the stones for 10, 15, 20 minutes. She talked about the weather, and about the corner, and about the ranunculus, and once, the surveillance man noted this, as if it were evidence. She told the grave that the coral was still better than the white, and the grave did not argue back, and the woman laughed. They brought him a photograph. A long lens shot from a car, a fat woman in a cheap coat, kneeling in the dirt, talking to his parents. And Don Cosimo Ferraro looked at that photograph and remembered something his mother had said in the last year of her life. He had asked if she was lonely, whether he should arrange more company. She had waved him off with the irritated hand of a woman who has been managed enough. "I have a friend. Don't arrange anything. She sells flowers on a corner and she tells me I'm wrong about the ranunculus. Leave it alone, Cosimo. Let me have the one thing I chose myself." He had not asked her name. He had been important, and busy, he had let it go. And now his mother was 2 years gone, and a woman he had never met, a woman who didn't know his name, didn't know who Agnes's son was, didn't know that the graves she knelt at every Friday were surrounded by a world of money and danger and power, was still kneeling under that tree every Friday. With flowers she paid for out of a flower cart's nothing, telling his parents about the weather, arguing with his mother's stone about the white, asking nothing, telling no one, not even knowing whose graves she knelt at because his mother had never told her. Because his mother had wanted, for once in her managed, protected porcelain life, to be loved as a person and not as a Ferraro. And she had found it on a corner, at a cart, with a fat flower seller who argued with her about ranunculus and teased her about her brooch and talked to her like she was a human being and not a photograph. That is when the order went out. Nobody touches the flower girl. Not because she was useful, not because she was leverage, not because she was part of any calculation the Don had ever made, but because she had loved his mother when she didn't know who his mother was and had kept loving her after she was gone and had asked nothing, and asking nothing, wanting nothing, needing nothing, performing nothing was the only pure thing left in a world built entirely on transactions. He wrapped his protection around me the way you would put your coat over something your mother loved, and he did not tell me why, because the moment I knew it would change, I would bring the flowers because the Don was watching. And the whole point, the only point, the thing his mother had treasured, was that I brought them because I wanted to. So he watched over me in silence. He let me be afraid. And the letting me be afraid was the price of the thing staying real. I found all of this out on a Friday, at the cemetery. I had just laid the ranunculus coral, as always, the stems cut at an angle the way Agnes had taught me her husband liked, when I realized Enzo was standing a little way off, by the path, waiting. He had followed me. Or he had always been there. The difference, I was beginning to understand, was smaller than I thought. He came and stood beside me at the graves. He looked at the names, Pietro, Agnesi, and his face did the crumbling thing again, and he said very quietly, "She talked about you until the end." He sat with her for those last days and she talked about you, the flower woman on the corner who told her she was wrong about the ranunculus. He never knew your name until he saw your face in a photograph, and then he told me, all of it, whose mother she was, why the enforcer went white, why the awning appeared, why the collector walked past my cart like it was a church, why the coffee was free and the shadow directive existed and the most dangerous men on the block had been silently, invisibly arranged around the protection of a fat flower seller for 3 months. Because I had loved his mother when I didn't know she was anyone, and had kept loving her after she was gone, and had asked for nothing and had wanted nothing, and had kneeled in the dirt every Friday for 2 years talking to 2 stones about the weather and the ranunculus and the argument about the white, and that, to a man who had spent his whole life being wanted for something, was the only thing left in his world that was given for free. Now I knew, and knowing changed everything Agnes had wanted to protect. The not knowing was the gift. The not knowing was what made it love instead of duty, generosity instead of performance. A woman on her knees in dirt because she wanted to be, not because someone was watching. I could stop. I could give the cart away and disappear, pack the bathtub flowers and the one good coat and go to another city and start over as no one, safe, invisible. Agnes was gone. The promise was made to a woman who could no longer hold me to it. I could walk away from the graves and the corner and the green awning and the impossible courtesies and never know, never feel, never carry the weight of a dead woman's love and a living man's gratitude, or I could keep the promise. Coral ranunculus, every Friday. Not because I didn't know whose graves they were, but because now I did, and it didn't change what I had promised, and it didn't change that the coral is better than the white, and it didn't change that Agnes was my friend, and Pietro was her husband, and the dirt under the linden tree was the most important place I stood all week. I knelt back down. I straightened the ranunculus on Pietro and on Agnesi coral, the good ones, the ones I'd argued with the wholesaler for at 4 a.m, and I said out loud to the stones in the voice I always used when I talked to them, "Your son knows now, I'm sorry, but it doesn't change anything. I'm still going to argue with you about the white. The answer is still coral. The answer was always coral, you stubborn, wonderful woman." And behind me, a sound. Not a footstep, something smaller, the sound of a man trying not to make a sound. I turned around. He was standing on the path. I had never seen him before, not knowingly, but I knew him at once because he had his mother's eyes. The astonished eyes. The eyes that had looked at me the first Friday as if the offer to get ranunculus was a thing that couldn't possibly be real. A man in his 50s, silver and heavy and very still, standing 6 feet from me with his hands at his sides like a man who did not know what to do with them. He was the most powerful man in the city, and he was standing in a cemetery with his hands dangling because a fat flower seller was kneeling at his mother's grave, and the kneeling had broken something in him that his power could not fix. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then he said, "She was right about the white. She told me once. She only said white to keep you talking. She didn't want the argument to end." And I started to cry. Because of course she did. The wonderful, stubborn, devious woman. Of course she threw the argument on purpose for 2 years, said white when she meant coral, held her position for 40 Fridays just to keep me on the bench a little longer. She had engineered our friendship's architecture out of a disagreement about flowers, and the disagreement was the foundation, and the foundation was love, and I would never get to tell her I'd figured it out. He did not offer me money. A lesser man would have tried to pay me. He understood the way his mother had understood, the way the argument about the white had taught both of them, that the whole value of the thing was that it could not be bought. The moment money touched it, it would become a transaction, and the whole point was that it wasn't one. What he offered was this, a storefront. On a better corner, with good light and a cold room for stock and an apartment above it with heat that worked. It had been a flower shop once, years ago, before the block changed. His mother had mentioned it. My friend, the flower seller, dreams of a real shop someday and would never say so out loud. He said, "Let me give you the room, not as payment, not as debt, as a place to keep doing what you already do." She would want her friend to be warm. I run a flower shop now. It is called Agnes's. He did not ask me to call it that. I chose it, and when he saw the sign go up, he stood across the street for a long time and did not come in. I saw him through the window, a powerful man, standing on a pavement, looking at his mother's name in gold script on a flower shop window, and his face did the thing his mother's face used to do. The astonished thing. The look of a person who cannot believe something good is real. The cold room keeps my stock. The apartment has heat. The office worker who used to stand by my cart to breathe comes into the shop now, and I have made the front of it a place where the city can feel something for more than 90 seconds. The young woman who buys herself a ranunculus every Friday. She buys 2 now. 1 for the flat, 1 for the counter. She leaves the counter 1 with a note. For Agnes, she has never met Agnes, she doesn't need to. The name on the window is enough. And every Friday I close for an hour and I take coral ranunculus to Resurrection, to the linden tree. I tie them by hand. Not the cheap, fast tie from the cart days, but the careful one. The one that takes an extra minute. The one that says, "I have time now and the time is for you." Sometimes I go alone. Sometimes there is a long, dark car already there, and a heavy silver man standing under the tree with his hands at his sides, and we do not say very much because we are not really a don and a flower seller when we stand there. We are 2 people who love the same stubborn woman, putting coral on her grave, both still pretending the argument about the white is not over. It will never be over. That was the gift. She made sure of it. The most dangerous man in the city told his men nobody touches the flower girl, and not one of them knew why, and when they found out they went quiet, because there was nothing to say. A lonely old woman wanted to be loved as a person and not as a name. And she found one corner of the city where that was possible, and she protected it the only way she could, by never telling me who she was. If you had been me, standing under that linden tree the day you learned whose graves they were, would you have kept the promise? Stayed, knowing everything tied to that world forever? Or would you have walked away, disappeared, been safe, been no one again? The coral is better than the white. She knew it the whole time. Tell me in the comments. And one small thing before I let you go. If Winnie's story bloomed something in you tonight, you can help it reach someone else. On your YouTube app, there's a hype button below this video. Tap it. Use your points 3 free every week, and this story finds its way to someone who's never heard it. Think of it as leaving 1 more flower at the corner. You don't know who picks it up, but someone will, and it might be exactly what they needed.